Welcome everybody to the rescheduled December DDA informational and board meeting. Ms. Thompson, would you please get us started with the informational?
Well, welcome everybody to the DDA's December informational meeting. Statute requires that DDAs have 2 informational meetings each year, and we do so in June and December. So we use December as an opportunity to give you an overview of what's been happening here in the last 6 months. So today we will talk about the TIF system, the parking system, and some general DDA information. So we'll start with the TIF system, which of course is the system that allows us to make our investments in our downtown. So 2024 has been a really busy year for DDA staff. We have been working on creating a new development and TIF plan. Over the last 6 months, some of those activities include the DDA board. As you all know, you have established our plan goals. The downtown planning efforts that will be informing this plan are either continuing or have been completed. So we have the city's comprehensive plan, which is of course being led by the city. We have the downtown circulation study, which is being led by the DDA. We have the geothermal study, which is being led by the Office of Sustainability. And then the MDOT jurisdictional study, which was led by the city and has been completed. We have also completed our base level of service discussions with our colleagues at the city. So these discussions identified all of the maintenance and service downtown, who is responsible for each of these services, and we look to identify gaps and inconsistencies. So from those discussions, we are now exploring the DDA taking on an expanded role in service and maintenance. And how we're looking at this is similar to how we operate our parking system, where we would contract with one vendor who can take care of all of the services that we are looking for. So basically, we are looking to establish a downtown service team. So we want a team of individuals who can really address all of the gaps in service and inconsistencies that exist in our downtown. So in February, we anticipate having to the board a preliminary project list with cost estimates, including a cost estimate for a downtown service team. City Council has also passed a resolution changing the name of the Citizens Advisory Council to the Downtown Development Area Resident Consultancy Council. Doesn't exactly roll off the tongue, but the point of that was to more clearly reflect the inclusive nature of this committee, being that any resident of downtown is eligible to serve on this committee. You do not have to be a citizen. We anticipate, which I think we've talked about quite a bit, having a development and TIF plan ready for council's consideration this coming summer. In October, we held our second downtown planning open house. We collaborated with the city on this, and the topics that were discussed at this open house were the comprehensive plan, our development plan work, and the downtown area circulation study. This was a one-day event. We felt like it was very successful. We had over 200 participants. So the downtown area circulation study is now in its final phase. As a reminder, the circulation study has 4 main components. We're looking at extending our current downtown bikeway system out into the neighborhoods, into recreation. We're looking at transit enhancements. We're looking at the pedestrian environment. And you may remember this component of the study started out as looking at event streets, a wide range of event streets, but it was pretty specific to event streets. After our March public engagement sessions, what we heard from stakeholders and from our community made us recognize that we needed to expand this component of the study to the pedestrian environment as a whole. And we're also looking at the street network and the navigation of our streets downtown. So I'm just going to briefly talk about some of the recommendations in broad terms that are coming out of the study that you will see more of in February. So for our bikeway projects, we have 5 recommendations that are rising to the top. They are indicated by those dotted lines. I will note that number 6, the Miller Bikeway Extension, that is a project that will be under construction this spring. When Amber gives her CIP schedule review today, you will learn more about the city securing funding for this project, which greatly reduced the DDA scope of the project and our funding commitment. So the DDA will now be responsible for 1 block from First to Chapin of that Miller Ave Bikeway Extension. On the transit enhancement recommendations, we are taking an overall approach of reserving street space on key transit corridors to set them up for future improvements. And this is based on the RIDE's 2045 long-range plan. And we're also looking at supporting short-term operational needs, so things like transit signal priority, otherwise known as TSP, which is a tool that allows buses to move through intersections more efficiently. On the pedestrian environment, we are looking at making infrastructure investments in street design, public space enhancement, and placemaking and wayfinding. And for the street network recommendations, this is really boiling down to 2-way restorations, 5th and Division being the main project, in addition to some changes to signalized intersections. So taking some of our intersections that currently have a signal and shifting those to all-way stop signs. We have done this already in a couple of locations downtown. So moving on, the Elevate program. This is the DDA's Public Art and Placemaking program. As you all know, you approved this program in June, and DDA staff have been very busy getting some projects off the ground. So round 1 of our Elevate projects are in the works. We have 5 projects. So the first project that you're going to see is in Liberty Park Plaza. It is a temporary light and sound installation. This project will be in place from mid-January through mid-March. This is something we've talked about for a long time. How do we encourage people to come downtown that January through March period where things are pretty slow? So bringing in these public art installations is something that we want to try. We're also working on a mural in Liberty Park Plaza, and that is in collaboration with the city's Parks Department. We have a sunshade project at the Farmers Market Plaza, and we have a large-scale wayfinding project which will help people navigate from the Ann Ashley parking structure over to Carytown and the Farmers Market. And finally, in the works, we have a scavenger hunt project that is working with David Zinn on 10 installations throughout our downtown. And that project, we should start to see those installations this spring. And that's something where we're hoping every year to be able to add to that collection, and they're permanent installations. And another opportunity that I think was mentioned at another meeting, but it's just we're very excited about this potential project, so I wanted to bring it up again, an opportunity on Ann Street. So this would be building on the work that the Ann Arbor District Library and the African American Cultural and Historical Museum have done on the Living Oral History Project. So the map you see on the screen is part of the walking tour for the Living Oral History Project. And I'll draw your attention to the number 1, which was the former Black Business District. So what we are looking to do is add a complement to this walking tour by adding murals honoring former business owners and community leaders who were in the Black Business District. Ann Street gave us a really unique opportunity because of the number of municipal buildings that exist along Ann Street. So where we stand with this project is we have the green light from city administration to use City Hall, the fire station, and the Ann Ashley parking structure as a canvas. The Ann Arbor District Library has graciously agreed to work with us on this project, and the African American Cultural and Historical Museum is working with us in an advisory capacity. So more to come on this project, but we are looking to get this off the ground as soon as we can. And then every year the DDA takes on annual repairs and maintenance. This year that work was focused on paver repairs, tree planting, and accessibility improvements, and I'll just share a couple of examples. DDA maintains that amenity zone on the sidewalk, so we have both large-scale and small-scale projects that we take on every year. The top pictures are an example of a larger-scale project that is on William Street, where we completely replaced that amenity zone and also expanded the tree pits to allow for those trees to hopefully thrive. And then the lower picture is just an example. That is West Washington Street. We do dozens and dozens of this type of brick repair that you see in the before and after picture. We are also working on making improvements along the First Street Bikeway to enhance crossing areas for people who rely on tactile cues to safely cross. So in the after photo, you can see the reddish color truncated domes, that material that you typically see in crosswalk ramps. We have added that to the sidewalk edge of that crossing area, in addition to the raised yellow areas that you see in the crosswalk. So we are making these type of improvements in 10 locations along the First Street Bikeway. And also we have installed our seasonal lights in over 25 blocks downtown. I think this is something that our community, and I know our business community, certainly appreciates. And then we have a bike parking assessment that is nearly complete. This assessment will include recommendations for locations and best practices for equipment and support features. So things like wayfinding and bike repair stations. And that moves us on to the parking system. I have a few slides to share. So the curbside management study was completed this summer. That study broke down recommendations into 3 categories: near term, medium term, and long term. We are currently focusing on a few of those near term recommendations. On-street accessible spaces, it was our top priority. So the federal government is working on issuing guidelines for the quantity of on-street accessible spaces that are required. It hasn't made its way through the process yet, but we know it's coming and we wanted to get ahead of that. So we did an analysis of all of our block perimeters downtown, because this new standard will require 1 accessible space for every 25 paid spaces along a perimeter. So we did an analysis of all of our block perimeters, and we established that we need to install probably about 60 or so spaces. We are currently underway with installing 48 of those spaces. We're hoping to have that done by the end of this year. And then in 2025, we will tackle another dozen or so. We're also having ongoing discussions with community standards. So one of the other near-term recommendations was increasing our inventory of short-term parking spaces. But to do this successfully, we need to have a partner in community standards. So we are working with them, and I anticipate in 2025 we will probably have an area where we pilot this. We are also underway with over $3.5 million of work in our parking structures. 1.1 million of that is an annual restoration, and this year we're focusing on Liberty Square and 4th and Washington. another 1.1 million in replacing the rooftop fencing on 6 of our facilities. And then finally, about 1.3 million in lighting upgrades at the 4th and Washington facility and Forest. And that brings us to general DDA information. So other activities have included, this board completed a board training session. We have hired our communications specialist position. Staff has reviewed 6 site plans and 54 right-of-way permits in the last 6 months. You all have approved an investment policy and a fund balance policy. We have implemented a new PO system. We have updated our financial software to a cloud-based system. We have received a $200,000 grant from MDOT. And finally, the Downtown Bikeway Loop received a Project Excellence Award from the Michigan Association of Planning. So that wraps up our December informational meeting, other than to express my appreciation to our taxing authority partners and to this board for their ongoing support.
Thank you, Maura, and thank you to the DDA staff as well for all their hard work and a long list of accomplishments. Do I have a motion to adjourn the informational meeting, right?
So moved.
Second. Thank you. All in favor of adjourning the informational meeting, please say aye.
Aye.
The informational meeting is adjourned. That takes us directly to the board meeting. Ms. Thompson, would you please step up for roll call?
Tyler Kinley,
Present.
Micah Bartelme,
Here.
Milton Dehoney, Mike Micklon,
Here.
Steve Brummer,
Here.
Kim Mays, Elizabeth Berry, here. Alex Deek, Theresa Nichols, and Angela Jackson, here. We have a quorum.
Thank you, Ms. Thompson. And thank you to all the board members for making it and being flexible. We're going to start. Do I have a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Thank you, Steve. Second.
Second.
Thank you, Tyler. All in favor of approving the agenda, please say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. The agenda is approved. We'll move on to public comment. If any members of the public wish to address the board, you'll have 3 minutes at the podium, and Kelly will be timing you. Do we have anyone signed up? None signed up? Anyone want to step in? Seeing none, we'll move on. Ms. Thompson, the Executive Director report.
A couple of quick things. I wanted to formally welcome Charlotte Gears, our new communication specialist, to the team, wherever she is. Happy to have her here.
Hi, Charlotte.
And then just a few, 2 housekeeping things. Because we are having this board meeting today, tomorrow's DDA work session has been canceled because we didn't expect you to show up 2 days in a row. And also in your packet, in your communications, you have the 2025 board schedule. And I will make a note that from our board training session, we talked about the executive committee meeting and the need to have that meeting or not have that meeting, and it was decided that having that meeting on an as-needed basis made the most sense. So you will see in your calendar that those meetings are not scheduled, and we will schedule them as needed.
Thank you. Do we have any DDA member communications? Seeing none, we'll move on to the consent agenda. Looks like we've got minutes and disbursements are the only items on the consent agenda. Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Support?
Second.
Thank you, Mike. All in favor of approval of the consent agenda, please say aye.
Aye.
Consent agenda is approved. New business. We have 2 resolutions for consideration today. The first resolution is to approve the DDA capital improvement plan schedule, TIF and parking for 26 to 2031. The DDA is required to incorporate CIP into the city CIP. As a reminder, on the TIF side, we are in a planning phase, and our development plan work will shape our CIP next year and into the future. As a result, staff are not introducing new projects this year. Ahead of considering the resolution, Amber and Jada will share a CIP presentation. Amber, Jada, take it away.
Thanks, Micah. So this is the time of year where, in addition to the informational meeting, we talk about the DDA's capital improvement plan schedule. And this year we are focused on the time frame of fiscal years 2026 through 2031. And just a little bit of quick background for those that are less familiar with the city's CIP. The State Planning Enabling Act requires a capital improvement plan, and projects supported by local public dollars must be reflected. In 2013, City of Ann Arbor ordinance was changed to reinforce that our projects must be included in the broader city CIP. It's really intended to be used as a tool to make sure that we are all working together to meet the city's comprehensive plan goals and to inform budgeting. And it's also a great mechanism for interdepartment collaboration and project planning and value-based project scoring. And we'll talk about all of that in more detail in February when we bring you that project list and talk about the development plan next steps. And just to give you a sense of the schedule and coordination, in the fall, staff from all over the city meet to scope and coordinate projects. We have the draft CIP pulled together typically in November. The Planning Commission is required to review and adopt the CIP, so you see that on the schedule there. And then we use the DDA CIP schedule to help inform our budget, as do other city departments. So our CIP schedule includes both TIF and parking dollars. We're going to start with the TIF side first, and this is a review of what Micah said at the beginning of this item. This year, the key thing to keep in mind is that we are in this planning phase, so staff are not introducing new projects into the CIP. Looking ahead to next year, we do expect big changes to our CIP next year as we wrap up the circulation study, the comprehensive plan, and all of that other work that will inform our development plan. So here is our recommended CIP schedule on the TIF side. You can see the project name and then the dollars that's by fiscal year. And then we also have the project total, and keep in mind that is the project total, not the CIP total, because some of these projects start before this CIP period. Almost all of the projects in this CIP we've already started to some degree, and overall it's a very lean CIP for us. We typically average around $5 million in capital costs annually, but again, that's because we are not introducing new projects this year.
Amber, real quick, so
Sure.
This adoption doesn't preclude new projects coming into the CIP post the circulation study, et cetera, but this is just kind of the legacy stuff we've already decided on, such as 4th Ave, Miller Bikeway, and the things that are on here.
Right, so because of the timing of our development plan adoption, our development plan project list will come after the CIP season. So we're hoping to build some capacity into our budget this year to be able to start implementing that adopted development plan, and then in next year's CIP schedule or cycle, it happens at the same time every year, then we would introduce all of those new projects.
Okay, great. So this will look different next year at this time when we've identified those new projects.
Exactly.
And budgeted those funds.
Yeah, it should look quite different next year.
Got it.
And you said typically we do $5 million a year?
That's what we were averaging prior to this planning period, about $5 to $6 million a year.
Great.
All right, so I want to review two of the biggest changes that we're recommending right up front. And we are essentially recommending swapping CIP dollars between our Miller and our Ann Street projects. So Maura teed this change up in her presentation. We'll talk about the Miller Ave Bikeway extension first. This has been in our CIP for a couple of years. Today, the Miller Bikeway ends at First Street. The DDA boundary extends one block west to Chapin. When this was originally put into our CIP and scoped, it wasn't clear if city engineering was going to be able to extend the bikeway further west. So when we programmed it, we estimated cost to construct a raised bikeway from First wrapping around Chapin to West Park, which is what you can see from the image on your screen. We wanted to make sure that we could start connecting to those West Side neighborhoods, even if there weren't dollars beyond our component. So since that time, city engineering was able to secure funds to extend the bikeway all the way to Maple Road, which is great. And rather than a raised bikeway, they've determined the best fit for the corridor is delineator separated. So both of those things significantly reduced the cost of the portion within our district. It reduced the need by just over $1 million. And we're still meeting that goal of connecting to the west side. And staff are recommending using that capacity for the Ann Strait project. This project has also been in our CIP for a couple of years. We first put it in our CIP after city engineering requested that we help fund sidewalk and bump outs adjacent to the Main Street Party Store, which you can see in the image there. That's kind of been a problematic sidewalk section to navigate for a long time now. Once the design was underway, engineering's project scope expanded pretty considerably, and it now includes underground infrastructure work. So that creates an opportunity for us to help restore the street in a way that better meets the community's needs. So we'll walk you through that in a little more detail, because in addition to the CIP resolution today, you have a resolution in your packet to approve a design contract for this portion of the project. So city engineering is the lead department. The focus is Ann Street from 1st Street to 5th Ave. The construction year is 2026. And you can see now, in addition to street resurfacing, it includes water main and stormwater infiltration. So we're recommending increasing our $250,000 commitment to around $1 million. So this increased commitment could help address a number of needs, including installing an ADA accessible crossing to the Ann Ashley parking structure. There are ramps there today, but it's not ADA accessible, and there's no formal crosswalk. And because the sidewalk is integrated with the parking structure here, this portion will show up in the parking CIP, which Jada will talk about shortly. There's no lighting between the Ann Ashley parking structure and Main Street today. Quite narrow sidewalks, and again, that ongoing issue with private parking over the public sidewalk. And all of this demonstrates what we heard through our development plan engagements, which was the need to improve pedestrian connections from the parking structures to destinations downtown. Decades ago, pear trees were planted along this corridor, and they're actually an invasive species that's not very long-lived, and when they start to die, they drop their limbs and they become a hazard. So these trees are at the end of their life, and we have an opportunity through this project to increase the size of the planting area and plant new trees here. And then lastly, we do have an older paver installation that's a constant maintenance concern in this block, and we've been hearing from the Hands-On Museum that they don't have a proper drop-off in this space. So at this point, we estimate that we can address these things for about $1 million construction budget, which was what we gained on the Miller Ave project. And then the first step is CIP approval. After that, it would be to approve the design contract that's in your packet today. All right, so that covers the big changes, and I'll go through everything else pretty quickly. You have the details in your packet, and most of this is review. So Maura already spoke to general repairs. We are the only part of the city that maintains certain amenities and infrastructure downtown. We do anticipate that these costs will continue to rise, and so that's reflected in our CIP. Moving on to annual streetlight capital maintenance. Streetlights lack an ongoing funding source, and they're actually funded through the city's general fund. The pedestrian light that you see there is specific to the DDA district. So starting in 2018, we began an annual maintenance contribution to help reduce that burden in the general fund. So this commitment continues. I think everyone here is familiar with the 4th Avenue project between William and Liberty, focused on supporting transit riders, and the Housing Commission's Affordable Housing Project. Just a few renderings of the recommended design there. We already talked about the Miller Bikeway extension all the way out to Maple Road. So right now our commitment is $75,000 with construction starting in the spring. Our commitment to the Elevate program continues with $125,000 annually from the TIF side. And related to public restrooms, the Throne public restroom pilot is underway. If we need to or want to make permanent changes once that pilot wraps up, we have $380,000 in our CIP to do that. And moving on to geothermal, the city's Office of Sustainability and Innovations is overseeing this study to identify locations where geothermal can be installed. We are funding the portion of the study in our district. And we also have $4 million in the CIP in 2030 and 2031 to help implement geothermal, but this is another one where we expect that to change and look different once the study is completed and we have our development plan completed. Lastly, we have the Main Street study still in our CIP. This is actually a Michigan Department of Transportation project, and they keep pushing it out, so it's now scheduled for 2030. MDOT has made it clear that they will not be funding improvements outside of resurfacing, and it's clear that the street needs improvements beyond just resurfacing, and a portion of that corridor is within our district. So we have dollars to start with a collaborative study with city transportation to understand the needs and what's possible, and then go from there. And that takes us to parking.
Quick, Amber, for the North Main, that's, what section of North Main is that?
That is from here on all the way to the highway.
That's the resurfacing bit,
I believe so.
their project?
Mhm.
And how's that affected by any of the negotiations currently taking place?
I think that's to be determined. So kind of in parallel tracks, the city is continuing to explore the jurisdictional transfer of taking over some of those MDOT corridors. But MDOT continues to have this project scheduled, and we all want to be prepared to collaborate on that if it does take place. So that's what this study is for.
Thank you.
So we're going to talk briefly about what you'll see in the CIP for the parking system. So in general, parking structure repairs and maintenance are kind of organized into three categories: structural, operational, and aesthetic. And because we're talking about capital planning today, we're going to be mainly focused on structural and some of those mechanical systems from that second column. And across this range of tasks, different entities are performing the work. So on the structural side and the mechanical system side, that looks like probably engineering firm and a construction firm specializing in parking structure restoration. And then other work is performed by our parking operator, PCI, or their contractor. So again, we'll kind of be focused on the first column or so. When we're thinking about programming dollars in the parking CIP, we're doing so to make sure that we have adequate funding to maintain these assets that are important to downtown. And we do that kind of always considering DDA goals, city goals, and then also our contractual agreement to maintain them. So there's language in the parking agreement that speaks to us maintaining these city assets. So that's kind of what we keep in mind as we're programming these dollars. In addition to repair and maintenance items that you saw on that first slide, parking CIP can also include large-scale equipment purchases, studies, or new construction. And as Amber shared, we're programming these dollars to create capacity and show our priority. Project approvals will follow the same pattern as they normally do. So much like with TIF, our parking CIP work is an ongoing process. It begins each year with inspections and evaluations in the facilities that help us to understand if there's any new or worsening conditions. We use that to inform all of our planning documents, our 20-year plan, our elevator and equipment plans. we get to this point where we've kind of created some capacity in the CIP, fine-tune that in the budget, and again, those dollars are then turned into bids and RFPs and come to the board for approval. So parking facility repairs are budgeted and prioritized based on a document, our 20-year structure maintenance plan. It's updated every 3 years, and this planning work is informed or performed by an engineering firm that specializes in parking structure restoration. We last updated it in 2022, kind of as we were doing our rate study work. Project location and scope are determined with different priorities in mind. Of course, life safety, public health issues, extending the usable life of an asset, through appropriate maintenance, reductions in operations and kind of day-to-day maintenance costs, and then also achieving some of our energy efficiency and sustainability goals. And I'm only showing 5 years here. It's a huge spreadsheet, but this plan helps us schedule and anticipate the work over a long period. And again, this is what we used as we were working on our rate plan and looking kind of long-term at parking rates. And I don't expect you to read all of this, but this was just to demonstrate how detailed the plan gets for each structure, kind of breaks down the facilities into different areas. And it's important to note that, you see here that they are putting numbers in for different components for different years. We try and stick to that planning, but there's always things that come up, and we have to kind of shift or change where we're doing work or what work we're doing in a certain year. Again, that can include new or worsening issues that we identify during the inspections, supply chain considerations, any kind of efficiencies that we can gain by aligning work type or products that we're buying, focusing efforts on particular facilities, and also understanding the neighborhood context. Is this neighborhood, we don't take out 2 structures in the same neighborhood, what else is happening construction-wise in the neighborhood? So that kind of all feeds into our thinking about CIP. So this is the proposed CIP schedule for fiscal years 26 through 31. And our categories are generally the same every year. The totals in the top 4 rows, so general equipment, restoration, and elevators, have been updated this year just based on planning work that we've done over the last year, particularly around equipment, planning, and elevators. And the board has already approved 2 modifications that are coming in elevators. So those numbers all reflect those projects. Additionally, we have added to our CIP schedule dollars for the Ann Street project that Amber mentioned, our contribution to the Elevate program, and in the city CIP they assign a small amount to bridge inspection at the parking fund because Library Lane and the portion of Fifth Ave over the structure is a bridge that's included as part of our CIP work as well. So that is our parking plan. So the resolution before you today is to approve the TIF and parking CIP schedules and to authorize us to put them forward for inclusion in the city CIP document. I believe Planning Commission is actually adopting that and reviewing that tonight. The proposed schedule has been reviewed against our 10-year plan, and the near-term years do conform with our recently approved fund balance policy. But we'll continue to have discussions over the next several months as we review our fiscal year 26 and 27 budgets.
Thanks, Jay. Questions from the board for Amber or Jared?
I have one for Amber. The amount for maintenance, like annual repairs maintenance, that's separate. I mean, I heard you mention, costs going up, that type of thing, but that's separate from anything that changes with like the services with the city, or is that factoring in some of that?
What
Sorry, services that we'd be performing downtown. Like, we're talking about expanding scope.
Oh, yes.
So is that factoring in expanded scope, or is that just kind of status quo costs increasing?
That's just status quo cost increasing for capital maintenance. When we talk about an expanded service role, that will likely not come out of the CIP because those will not be permanent investments in infrastructure.
Right.
That will be things like landscaping, sidewalk cleaning, essential services, but probably not reflected in the CIP, not capital.
And there's concurrent discussions on how to fund those
Yeah.
expanded services.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
Should that materialize.
Thanks.
Jada, I had a couple quick questions. So I know, pandemic, we had put off some maintenance, needed maintenance at the structures as part of kind of our tightening to conserve cash and fund balance. Have we kind of spread all that out and that's all recaptured in this, or is there still kind of a backlog of repairs and capital improvement, CapEx that we need to do at the structures that we didn't because we were so worried about funding?
So I think both. I think in the next, and we'll talk about this a little bit more when we talk about budget, in the next few budget years, there will be some significant dollars kind of allocated to get back to some of the things that we passed on. But a lot of what we did was kind of just push it down the road a little bit and shift. So I think probably after the next couple years, we'll be caught up with some of the larger projects that we missed. But again, a lot of that just kind of things got reprioritized and shifted out further into the 20-year plan.
And then when we look at kind of the average annual expenditure for the CIP over these few years, it's kind of around 4 and a little bit, up and down, depending on what's going on. Has that been pretty standard across other capital improvement years?
Yeah, I
budgets?
think in the recent years, as we've done some work to kind of fine tune our planning around elevator repairs, we're building that more into our CIP, especially because, some of the bigger modifications, it's like $800,000. So we're building that into these dollars as well. But it's a little bit higher. I think probably pre-pandemic, it was closer to 3.5, 4. But it's in line with more recent years.
And last quick question was the Elevate program. We've got a portion out of parking and a portion out of TIF for a combined annual total of $175. Is that right?
For the annual projects, yes, and then you'll remember that for TIF, all TIF capital projects, the policy is to allocate 1% of the capital project total to public art. So each of those projects that you saw today will have art included with them, except for annual repairs. It doesn't make sense to, include public art with each of those repairs. We've talked about maybe a contribution to the annual dollar amount.
So the $175 a year is going into a budget pool to then fund the 1% of the projects, or is that
No, the
175 is going to
170
be spent outside of necessarily project areas, and then an additional 1% whenever there is a capital project
Exactly.
will be allocated out of that budget
Yes.
towards more of the
Yes, so like with the 4th Avenue project, we have 1% of that project where we're already planning art. And that's separate from our annual investment in the Elevate program and in public art downtown.
Okay. Other questions for Jada or Amber? Thank you very much. Very informative. Discussion or questions amongst the board?
Be interested to see the changes on Ann Street. I think looking at the street, being on that street a lot, I'm just curious sort of how that'll look, right? Because it's hard for me to envision the changes, especially like widening sidewalks or dealing with the parking across it. But I'm curious to see what we come up with.
Yeah, same, for, it makes sense to reallocate the dollars to a more effective, or area where they have more impact. Certainly, I think there's some need there. For my part, I agree with the needs identified, and, we're looking to approve a design contract today. I'm excited to see what we come up with. All right, unless there's further discussion, I will move forward this resolution to support the DDA capital projects for inclusion in the city CIP for FY 2026 to 2031. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. All in favor of approving the resolution to support the DDA capital projects for inclusion in the city CIP for FY 2026 to 2031, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, please say nay. The resolution is approved. The second resolution we are considering today is to approve a contract with OHM for the Ann Street design. Amber and Jada teed this up for us as part of the CIP presentation. Since City Engineering already has a consultant contract with OHM for the project, it makes the most sense to utilize the same team. This resolution authorizes a $148,500 contract, $129,800 from TIF, and $18,700 from parking. Anything to add that you need to know outside of that, Amber?
I think so.
Have we worked with the OHM team before?
We have not.
Yeah, they seem new.
But city engineering has a, as needed, as you said, has an as needed services contract with them. They've worked with them quite a bit.
Okay. Questions or discussion from the board?
Just seems like it makes sense. Working with the city already, and
Looking forward to it.
I think also, we've done a lot of work on design guidelines, so the engineering firm is a little bit less. It's more about the engineering and include the components rather than the grand vision of design. So, well, without further ado, do I have a motion to approve the resolution to approve a contract with OHM for the Ann Street design? Moved. Thank you. I will support. All in favor of the resolution to approve a contract with OHM for the Ann Street design, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, please say nay. The resolution is approved. Moving on, we are in, thank you very much, Amber.
Yeah, thanks.
We are in special business and reports, and we have Amber with us yet again for a special report. This is the Velo, am I saying that right? Velo?
Yep.
Velo? Co-pilot study presentation, which was postponed from our November board meeting. This is a new data collection approach, and we were able to pilot during the circulation study. Amber is here to share the pilot results with us today.
Thank you. Yes, this is a presentation-heavy meeting. We appreciate you all hanging in there. All right, so through the circulation study, a stat that we felt it's important to call attention to is that on average, 30% of people in the community do not have access to a car. Others make the choice to walk, bike, or bus for other reasons, and everyone needs a way to safely and comfortably get to their destinations. And this local stat is just one example of the work that we need to do to increase access. This shows average number of jobs accessible within 20 minutes. And as you can see, if you can drive, if you have the ability to drive and you have access to a car, you can get to nearly every job in the city. But if you're dependent on taking the bus or finding a safe biking or walking route, it gets a lot more challenging. So we know that we have more work to do. And what you see on the screen are just numbers, but there are real human experiences behind these numbers. And we want to try to better understand those experiences and be able to talk about them as part of the work that we do. So that's why we were very interested when we had the opportunity to test a tool that captures those real experiences and then gives us the data to understand what it's like to rely on riding a bike in the city of Ann Arbor. Velo is a tech startup. Their first device you can see on the screen there, it's called a co-pilot. Essentially looks like a bike light that attaches on the back of a bike. and it captures both the speed and the proximity of passing vehicles. And I'll show this short clip just so you can see how it works. So it happens pretty quickly, but you can see that it's tracking the distance of that passing vehicle and the speed of the vehicle. And this one is pretty heavily anonymized. That's what the term that Velo uses. So you can't even identify the background here. And the other videos we show, you'll be able to identify the location, but other identifying features like people's faces or license plates have been blurred. Okay, so for the study, we partnered with Common Cycle. They helped us organize a group of resident volunteers, and those volunteers rode all over the city. So in your packet, you have data, the full report has data from all over the city. We were interested in 5 focus routes that overlapped with our circulation study. So that's West Washington, Miller, North Division, East Catherine, and Packard Street. The brighter the line, the more rides or more data we had for those corridors. We had a range of participants. Some ride their bikes independently, others ride with their families, including their children. You can see from the top quote there, one family was preparing their daughter to ride independently to school, and they called attention to safety concerns they had, particularly at North Division, Cary, and Broadway. Others, you can see from the other quotes, the confidence of the riders varied, but many of our volunteers rely on a bike as their primary means of transportation. To give you a better sense of what Velo was analyzing or looking for, they are tracking the relationship between the passing distance and the speed of that pass. So the lower the speed and the wider distance, the more safe. The higher speed and the smaller the distance, the less safe. So this chart actually shows each individual pass. The good news is that most of the passes provided 6 feet of passing distance on average. That aligns with our local law that requires 5 feet of passing distance. We did, however, see passes less than 5 feet and in that less safe part of the chart. So if you look at the Velo report, you'll see a pretty complicated equation that they applied to all of the data. I'm going to try to go over it at a high level and use these videos to convey user experience and comfort. Alongside each video, you'll see some information. Part of that is this stress score, and according to Velo, anything higher than a 0.5 is stressful and uncomfortable for the person riding the bike. So this is a video on South Division within the separated bikeway. You can see the car speed is below the speed limit. There is a lot of passing distance, and this is considered a low stress pass. Here's another example on the South Division bikeway. The vehicle in this case is well below the speed limit. There's still a large passing distance, and again, a low stress pass here. And hopefully this isn't making anybody too dizzy. All right, so let's look at how that experience compares to an area that doesn't have separation. So this is North Division, just beyond the separated bikeway, behind, or actually in front of Community High School. And this is close to that Division Broadway area that one of our participants expressed safety concerns about. And you can see everyone's traveling downhill here. The first car gives the person on the bike space as they pass, but the second car does not, and they don't appear to slow down. So this is considered a stressful pass. Here's another example on Packard Street. You can see that the person riding the bike is traveling at a comfortable pace in the bike lane. There's a large truck traveling well above the speed limit, showing no signs of slowing down. So you can see their vehicle speed is 43 miles an hour. And keep in mind that studies show that at speeds of around 40 miles an hour, there's a 75% risk of severe injury and a 50% risk of death in a crash. So speed matters. And while they provided just over 5 feet of distance, the speed of the truck made this a very stressful pass. Here's another downhill example, the person riding in the narrow bike lane on Miller that thankfully next year we will see this condition change. Again, the driver is traveling above the speed limit when they pass the person biking, and that is another stressful pass. And then just like thinking about, you know, that device is on the back of a bike, that's often where a child seat is, or a child seat might be trailing behind a bike, and just thinking about the experience of these riders. So here's West Washington Street. This is a quiet residential street. The vehicle's moving at a slow speed and they provide plenty of passing distance. This is a low stress pass. So hopefully just in these few video samples, you've gotten a sense for how street design starts to influence driver behavior and the experience of people that use these streets. And that's exactly what Velo concluded, that there's significant difference in average driver behavior based on infrastructure type. Where we have separated bike lanes, vehicles are traveling at lower speeds and providing more distance. Where there's no separation, like in a standard bike lane or no bike lane, they found higher speeds and closer passes. Okay, we'll take just a few slides to look at the data in more detail related to the focused routes. So remember, these are the areas without separated bike lanes. Velo looked at risk per pass, risk per mile, and risk per minute. And across all of these, Miller, Division, and Packard kept rising to the top. And unfortunately, we did not have enough data to make conclusions about Catherine Street. Digging into this in more detail, we can look at where we saw close passes. So these are passes closer than 5 feet. On the focus routes, nearly 40% of all passes on Packard were too close, and about 30% of all passes on Miller. When we look at it by bike infrastructure type, the curb protected bike lanes performed very well. When we look at it by vehicle type, pickup truck drivers had the highest frequency of close passes, but pretty high frequency among small and large vehicle drivers as well. And this is an area where the professional drivers really seem to be doing the best job of providing enough space.
Back one.
Sure.
It's interesting on the none is less chance of a close pass than a standard bike lane. No bike lane.
I think it's because the driver will veer off so much
To give room.
to give room.
Or are
That's
those
my
like
theory, am I
none
right
or-
on that?
None are more residential streets that are like less.
Yeah, I mean, it may be like the psychology of it because there's not a dedicated lane there. Drivers are, you know, more often giving a little bit more space.
That's my experience as a cyclist and as a driver. Like, I know I will give a lot of space if I'm driving and slow down, right? Like,
And it could also be that people that are riding a bike on a street without a bike lane are more likely to be taking the lane, so riding more in the center of the lane, which then prevents a pass.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And no bus close pass interactions.
That's interesting, yeah.
Were we sure about that? That's a big vehicle.
It's not always true.
Okay, so looking at the stressful pass, remember this is the risk score of 0.5 or higher. So it's a combination of too close and too fast. And what Velo found was that every single pass captured on Division beyond the separated bike lane was stressful. Every single pass. On Miller and Packard, more than 50% of the passes were stressful. So when we think about what this means for the people who are relying on bikes and taking those routes today, they're having stressful experiences all the time just to get to their destination. And when we're thinking about our larger carbon neutrality goals of encouraging more people to take a bike, these are real barriers that we have to overcome if we want more people riding bikes downtown. Velo also summarized the passing speed, and this is at the time of the pass, so this is when you would expect the vehicle to be at the driver to be at their most cautious and the vehicle to be going at its slowest. The good news is that the average passing speed was within the speed limit on all of the corridors. The bad news is that on every street except for Washington, we recorded passes above the speed limit. And back to that stat that I shared earlier about the risk of injury and death directly correlating with speed, that's the kind of behavior that we want to change through infrastructure. And lastly, Velo took all of the data that they collected and created a bike stress map of the city. Blue represents low stress and red high stress. It's a little challenging to read, so I'll point out some corridors. In that map on your left, Miller, Packard, and West Liberty are some of the most red corridors. And then when we zoom in on the DDA district area, that Division Broadway corridor becomes really clear, and a small segment on Washington by the YMCA where there's a lot of that drop-off activity. So with all of this, Velo concluded that there is a significant variation in risk among the proposed routes. Miller had the greatest risk per mile and per minute, and they suggested highest priority for that corridor, which is great because that's already in the plans. And Division had the riskiest overtakes, but less frequency of passing, and Packard also had some stressful sections. And they continued to call attention to the fact that the type of bike infrastructure matters, and said that curb protected bike lanes are significantly safer compared to standard lanes. And Maura already went over our circulation study recommendations, but those essentially align with what we heard from Velo. We're recommending extending the separated bikeway network on a lot of those corridors that rose to the top in terms of having high risk, and then recommending a bike boulevard on Washington to reinforce those slow speeds that we're already seeing. And from our volunteers, we generally heard positive feedback about participating in the pilot and the possibility that we can expand the separated bikeway network. That's everything I have.
Thank you, Amber. It's
Very informative.
really interesting
It's
data.
really good.
How long is the study ongoing, or is this wrapped up?
This
or
is wrapped up, so you're seeing
It's a
the end of
pilot?
it.
Okay.
And we always have the opportunity in the future, as we install more infrastructure, to bring this tool back and see if the changes we've made have resulted in a change in behavior. So that could be something interesting that we can do both with Velo, and there are also U of M researchers that are starting to look at this kind of technology as well.
Are we still also tracking usage of the bike lanes as well?
Yes,
Downtown
and we
ones?
added some additional counters this year. That dashboard is available on our website, and in your packet, there's a snapshot of use as well.
Okay. Any questions on the Velo co-pilot study?
I'd be curious to know if there, like, if you were to overlay road improvement, repaving, pothole repairs on that, just knowing, like, as a biker, when there's potholes and the cars are more likely to be moving out of the way, or I'm trying to move out of the way, the impact of that, which obviously, you know, isn't in the protected bike lanes, a little different, but for some of those major areas that had, like, the riskier scores, I'd be curious to see what the folks saw if they kind of overlaid that data.
Will this be made available online in an accessible, like I think the thing that comes to mind is like you get the bike counters, and I see online discussions, and you know, people are always saying nobody uses the bike lane, and people are starting to just link to that and be like, look, it's right here. The data is irrefutable, it's clear, it's concise, and it's rich. You can look at a bunch of stuff. This seems to me similar, where it's things that I feel like we thought or kind of had an inkling, but this is sort of proof. But is there a spot that it can live to be like, look at this? Because you know, you talk to people who bike on Miller, Packard, etc., and they could have told you that they've been saying this, right? The nice part is now it's like, oh, there's a way to measure it. We're measuring it. We have scoring, right? It's sort of like gives us the data with which to make decisions, and not just anecdotal, like that road sucks.
Seems a little tight.
Right. So is there a way that this could be made sort of more?
Yes, we definitely want to put it on, is that already on the website?
I'm not sure it's on the website yet, but Ryan Stanton did an article, must have been last week, because I noticed Spark reposted the article with the report maybe today. So if it's not on the site, we'll be getting it on the site.
Yeah, and now that we have Charlotte on our team, we'll also be brainstorming, you know, how can we push this out further beyond just the people that are coming to our website.
I think it's also an opportunity to talk about these results as we move into the project areas, as these come up for
Exactly. I mean,
approval, et cetera. It's,
Exactly.
you know, this is the why,
Right.
part of the reason of the why that we're looking at these areas. So it's certainly a companion piece to inform the project landscape.
Yeah. Love it.
Thank you.
Well, thank you. That was great. Moving on, we are in our communications section. Please note the following communications are included in your packet. There's no action required. This is for your information. We do have the DDA staff reports for December 2024. And as Maura mentioned earlier, we've got the DDA 2025 meeting schedule. Great time to get on your calendar now, so you can plan ahead to be here and have a quorum full 25. That's wrapping us up. We're going to move on to public comment. As you know, we have 3 minutes. Anyone who wishes to address the board, take the podium. Do we have anyone who wishes to comment today? Okay. Seeing none, I want to wish everybody a very happy holiday season. And do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Thank you, Steve. Second. Thank you. All right, all in favor of adjourning, please say aye.
Thanks.
Aye.
We are adjourned.